Treat yourself to 12 pounds of crab rangoons. You will definitely not regret eating 12 pounds of crab rangoons. Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, and that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'd like to sit back in my very squeaky chair, relax, and have a little conversation with all of you guys about comic books. That's right, today we're talking about comics. Specifically, we're talking about the great debate of comics versus manga and the generally accepted perception that comics are definitely losing out to manga in terms of overall popularity, acceptance, and general appeal. Because it's without a doubt, I think, that in the last decade or so, comics have definitely lost ground to manga. Once upon a time, it used to be that if you were hankering to get yourself some manga, you would either have to look for a very weird, sometimes poorly translated localization at a local bookstore or something, or you'd have to get lucky and get one or two volumes of your manga of choice at like a local fair or something during a big event in town, right? It wasn't a really common thing to get a whole lot of manga when I was a kid. Nowadays though, things are completely different. Large bookstores have entire sections just dedicated to manga. It's always a treat going there. And manga seems to be more and more popular with each passing day. There's more series that people are super excited about. Whereas with comics, a lot of the time, while there is some really impressive stuff coming out from time to time, I'm reminded of, the Void Rivals. It's a pretty good series with the new Transformers comics. I think it's called Something is Killing the Children, was pretty solid overall. And of course, there's always stuff like Conan and Red Sonja that I personally enjoy, but doubtlessly, especially for the big boys, DC and Marvel, it seems that there's always controversy and always people who are more than happy to harp on about it and how bad it is and all that jazz. But regardless of your opinions or your take on the matter, it's definitely true that manga does seem to be more popular and gaining ground compared to comics in recent years. And it's hard to pin down why. But I have a theory for why that might be. Or at the very least, I have a theory for why manga might be gaining traction compared to mainline comics like Spider-Man or Superman or things like that. You see, this is the Voynich Hotel. It is a manga series that I am very fond of, all things considered. It's by a guy named Doman Simon, or I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce the name. If I pronounce that wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments below. But this is a pretty fun little series. It is 3 volumes long. It has a definitive beginning and end. It is by one author, one artist too. I think he does all the art too. Yeah, story and art by Doman Simon. Nice, says it right on the cover. It's got a distinctive look to it too. So it's got a lot of appeal, and I'm not going to spoil anything about the story because I do legitimately hope that you go out and read this yourself, because I do like this series quite a lot. And once you read it, I think you'll understand why it's got some appeal, because I think it's just really well written. And in comparison, here's the Hulk. The Hulk has dozens of authors, dozens of artists. The Hulk does not have a definitive beginning and end to his series. It is ongoing because more Hulk stuff is always coming out. The same is true for Captain America, Spider-Man, the X-Men, Superman, Batman. The list goes on. I could name dozens of mainstream superheroes that have a conga line of authors and a veritable library of different series, different interpretations of the character, blah, 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 with lots of variants in between them. And in my opinion, part of the disparity that comics are experiencing right now is that so few of them have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. So few of them are single run and done series. The Voynich Hotel, Naruto, One Piece. That's a bad example. One Piece just never ends. Full Metal Alchemist. Even bad ones like Naruto. They have definitive beginnings and they have definitive ends. And sure, some of them run on for quite a while. but with a definitive beginning and end, a very obvious jumping on point and a very solid end to the story, with characters and such, all determined by one author, sometimes one artist, Soul Eater, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball Z. You know, these are all series that have one interpretation, one single route to take with the franchise, right? But the same is not true for the Hulk or any of the other mainstream heroes you can think of. And that variety works against comics, in my opinion. When you have potentially dozens of different authors giving their own interpretations of a character, their own interpretations of their motivations, their plans, their goals, what drives them, what motivates them to get up and fight at the start of an issue. You know, you're going to have wildly different interpretations of a character, which will lead to wildly different audience responses, which will lead to some people being super fond of one particular run for a character or a series in general. And that same run or series will be hated by other members of the audience because it differs in some arbitrary way from how they are fond of the character. And I understand why comics do this. Spider-Man is a cash cow franchise. Batman is a cash cow franchise. Obviously, DC and Marvel want to take the safe route and just keep reinventing the wheel, so to speak. And instead of giving audiences a new and interesting, perhaps, kind of character, or perhaps telling a new self-contained story that just runs on its own, Spider-Man has sold well for decades and will continue to sell okay for decades. Superman has sold well for decades and will continue to sell okay for decades. When people say that comics are on the decline versus manga, it's absolutely true. Okay, we've talked about this before. Comics are definitely on the decline, but I don't think they're going anywhere. Every publisher has so many books a month they're putting out weekly. There are weekly books for comics, weekly issues, right? Weekly major releases. Some storylines have huge fans who are practically lining up to get a hold of the new issue, right? Void Rivals, for instance. Void Rivals, Transformers, and G.I. Joe are all very nice stories. They have really dedicated fans. The new Sonic comic has some really dedicated fans who are super plugged into that. And yeah, Spider-Man, Superman, they have their dedicated fans. The new Absolute Batman line has a plethora of crazy fans. The new Absolute Wonder Woman line has some really dedicated fans. It's not that comics are going away, but there is definitely a reason that some people are more likely to pick up manga than they are comics, and I don't think it has anything to do with politics, agendas, or all that stuff. People like to attribute it to that, and it's absolutely true that that can be the kind of thing that drives you away from comics. But I don't think the politics or the agendas or the message that comics are pushing a lot in comparison to their manga counterparts, I don't think those would be as big of an issue if the comics themselves were allowed to be cohesive, single-run stories that tell a definitive narrative for the characters that goes from beginning, middle to the end. You know, part of, I think, the massive success behind Invincible is the fact that it's just a single run story without, obviously there's a multiverse in there, but there's not wildly different interpretations of the main character or his supporting cast. The same is true for like The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead was crazy popular for a bit. You know, it's just a storytelling thing. You want to have literary cohesion for your characters, and I think comics have really, in general, failed to do that. It's not just DC and Marvel. You know, I've said before, I'm a huge fan of Conan and Red Sonja. There's a dozen different authors for Red Sonja and Conan, you know, and the same is true for a lot of characters that have more than one run of appearances. It's just a consequence of the industry, and I think, you know, do I think we can pressure Marvel to just start giving us single run character stories? No. But I am going to say that the lack of single run character stories, the lack of single cohesive narratives is definitely a big part of why manga has gained so much traction and why it appeals to so many people, because it's a story you can read to the end without having to worry about which version of the characters you're following. And that, I think, has some appeal to it. But I don't know. Maybe that's just my shitty opinion. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Please like, share, subscribe, all that wonderful jazz. Check out the Discord. Check out the Patreon. Do check out the Voynich Hotel. It is genuinely really good. Doman does a great job with it. The mystery behind it is pretty fun. All the characters are really nice. A lot of them are really memorable. Fun story behind this one. But this is part of the reason I like Hawaiian shirts so much. See if you guys figure that out. Anyway, that's all I got for you kiddos today for realsies this time. I'm out. Ciao. See you next time. Bye-bye.